Julian walks in surprised during therapy. John Lennon's confession left room in shock. Los Angeles, California, March 1974. John Lennon was sitting in Dr. Arthur Janov's office, staring at a wall he'd stared at 100 times before. Primal therapy. That's what they called it. Screaming out your childhood trauma until you felt better. John had been doing it for months, screaming, crying, confronting demons he'd buried since he was 5 years old. But today was different. Today, someone was about to walk through that door who would force John to confront the one thing he'd been running from his entire life. His son. Dr. Janov sat across from John, notepad in hand, watching the most famous man in the world fidget like a nervous child. "You seem distracted today, John." John lit a cigarette. His hands were shaking. "I'm always distracted. That's why I'm here, isn't it? To figure out why I can't sit still in my own skin?" "We've been working on your relationship with your mother, with Julia, the abandonment you felt when she gave you to Mimi." John's jaw tightened at the mention of his mother's name. "Yeah, we've been working on that. For months. Screaming about it. Analyzing it. And you know what? I still feel like shit. That's because you're only looking at half the picture. What's that supposed to mean?" Dr. Janov leaned forward. "You're very good at talking about how your mother abandoned you, but we never talk about who you've abandoned." The words hit John like a physical blow. He knew exactly what Janov meant. Julian Charles Buchanan Lennon, born April 8, 1963, John's first son. The boy he'd left behind when he chose Yoko. The child he barely saw, barely called, barely acknowledged. "That's different," John said quietly. "Is it? Cynthia has him. He's fine. He's better off without me anyway. That's what your mother probably told herself about you." John stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Don't compare me to her." "Why not? You did the same thing she did. You left your child because your own needs felt more important." John's face was red now. "I didn't abandon Julian. I see him when I can. I send money. Money isn't love, John, and occasional visits aren't presents. That boy is 11 years old and barely knows his father. He's better off not knowing me. I'd just fuck him up like everyone fucked me up." That's when it happened. A knock on the door. Dr. Janov looked confused. "I'm not expecting anyone." The door opened, and there stood Julian Lennon, 11 years old, sandy blonde hair, his mother's blue eyes. But something in the shape of his face, the set of his jaw, pure John. John froze. Julian stood in the doorway looking small and uncertain and terrified. "Hi, Dad," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. John couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Dr. Janov looked between father and son, understanding immediately what was happening. "Hello, Julian," the doctor said gently. "Would you like to come in?" Julian took one hesitant step into the office. "Mom said you were here, in Los Angeles. She said maybe I could see you." John finally found his voice. How did you find me?" "May Pang helped me. She gave me the address." May Pang, John's assistant, his lover during his lost weekend separation from Yoko. Of course she'd help Julian. May had always said John needed to face his responsibilities. But John wasn't ready for this. He'd never be ready for this. "Julian," John started, his voice shaking, "this isn't a good time." "It's never a good time," Julian interrupted, and there was anger in his voice now. Real anger. "You're never available, never there, never my dad." The room went silent. Dr. Janov stood up. "I'm going to give you two some privacy. Take your time." He left the office, closing the door behind him. Father and son stood facing each other. And John Lennon realized that the moment he'd been running from his entire life had finally caught up with him. Julian Lennon didn't cry. He'd learned years ago that crying didn't bring his father back. He stood in that therapy office, looking at the man who'd given him life and then disappeared, and he felt nothing but cold determination. "Sit down, Jules," John said weakly. "Don't call me that. You don't get to use a nickname. You don't know me well enough." The words cut deeper than any of John's childhood memories ever had. John sat down heavily in his chair. "You're right. You're absolutely right." Julian remained standing. "Why did you leave us?" "It's complicated." "No, it's not. You met Yoko. You left Mum. You left me. That's not complicated. That's just what happened." John lit another cigarette with trembling hands. "Your mother and I, we weren't right for each other. We got married because we had to. Because you were coming and it was 1963, and that's what people did. So I'm the mistake that trapped you? No. God, no. You were never a mistake." "Then what was I?" Julian's voice was rising now. "Because I must have been something pretty terrible for you to forget I exist." "I never forgot you. You forgot my birthday last year. And the year before. You forgot Christmas. You forgot my school play where I had the lead role. You forgot everything that mattered." John couldn't look at his son. "I sent presents. I don't want presents. I want a father." The silence that followed was suffocating. Julian walked over to the window, looking out at Los Angeles spreading beneath them. "Do you know what it's like, being John Lennon's son? Everyone knows who my father is. Everyone. And they all ask about you. What's your dad like? What's it like being a Beatles kid? You must be so proud." He turned back to face John. "And I have to lie. I have to pretend you're this great dad who's just really busy. Because if I tell them the truth, that I barely know you, that you chose your new family over us, then I'm the pathetic one. I'm the kid even John Lennon didn't want. That's not true, isn't it?" Julian's eyes were wet now, but he still wouldn't cry. "You have a new son now, Sean. I've seen pictures in the papers. You with him, you holding him, you looking at him the way you never looked at me." John felt something break inside his chest. "Julian, do you love him more because he's Yoko's? Because he's not a reminder of your old life? Because he's the son you actually wanted? Stop it. Why should I? You get to run away from the truth. Why can't I say it out loud?" John stood up, and for the first time, Julian saw his father's face clearly. The pain there. The guilt. The self-hatred. "You want the truth?" John's voice was rough. "Fine. Here's the truth. I'm a shit father. I always have been. I was terrified when you were born. Terrified I'd fuck you up the way my mom fucked me up. The way Aunt Mimi fucked me up. The way everyone in my life fucked me up." He took a shaking breath. "So, I did what scared people do. I ran. I chose music over you, fame over you, Yoko over you. And every day, every single day, I tell myself it's better this way. That you're better off without me in your life making everything worse." "That's bullshit," Julian said quietly. "That's just an excuse." "Maybe it is. You could have been there. You could have tried." "You're right." Julian stared at his father. "That's it? That's all you have to say? You're right?" John sat back down, suddenly looking much older than his 33 years. "What do you want me to say, Julian? That I'm sorry? That if I could go back and do it differently, I would? I can't say that. Because I don't know if it's true. I don't know if I'm capable of being the father you deserve." "At least that's honest." "Honesty's all I've got left." They sat in silence for a long time, father and son, strangers who shared blood and nothing else. Finally, Julian spoke. "Dr. Janov said you've been doing therapy, working through your childhood." "Yeah, primal therapy. Lots of screaming about my dead mother. Does it help?" John shrugged. "Sometimes. Sometimes I just feel like I'm screaming into a void." Julian sat down for the first time, taking the chair across from his father. "Tell me about her. About your mom. You never talk about her." "You don't want to hear about that." "Yes, I do. I want to understand why you are the way you are." John looked at his son with something close to surprise. "That's very mature of you." "I'm 11, not stupid." A ghost of a smile crossed John's face. "No, You're definitely not stupid. He lit another cigarette, gathering his thoughts. My mum was Julia Stanley. She was beautiful and wild and completely irresponsible. She got pregnant with me when she was 23. My father, your grandfather, was a merchant sailor named Alf. He was never around, so Julia gave me to her sister Mimi to raise. She gave you away? Yeah, when I was 5. Said she couldn't handle me. That Mimi could give me a better life. Julian processed this. But you still saw her? Sometimes. She'd visit, play with me, act like a fun aunt instead of a mother. Then she'd leave again, and every time she left, I felt like I was dying. John's voice was hollow now, lost in memories. When I was 17, I finally reconnected with her properly. She was teaching me banjo. We were building a real relationship. And then, he stopped. What happened? Julian asked softly. She was hit by a car, killed instantly, a off-duty cop who'd been drinking. She was 44 years old, and I never got to tell her that I forgave her for leaving me. The room was silent, except for the sound of traffic outside. So that's why, Julian said slowly. That's why you leave before people can leave you. John looked up sharply. What? You left me because you were scared I'd leave you first, or that I'd die, or that you'd fail me and I'd hate you the way you hated your mum. End. The accuracy of this statement, coming from an 11-year-old boy, stunned John into silence. How did you? Because I do the same thing, Julian said quietly. At school, with friends, I don't let anyone get too close, because everyone I love leaves. My dad left, my grandparents, everyone. John felt something crack inside his chest. Jesus, Jules, I did that to you. I made you scared to love people. Yeah, you did. They sat with that truth for a long moment. Then Julian asked the question he'd been carrying for years. Do you love me? Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Do you love me? 4 words, 1 question. The most important question Julian had ever asked. John Lennon sat there, cigarette burning down to his fingers, trying to find an answer that was both honest and kind. The problem was, he didn't know if those two things could exist together. I don't know how to love people, John finally said. I don't know if I ever learned how. My mom didn't teach me. Mimi was cold and strict. Love in my family was something you earned, not something you just got for existing. That's not an answer. I know. Julian's face was hard. Just say it. Say you don't love me. At least then I'll know. John started, then stopped. His hands were shaking. I love the idea of you. I love knowing you exist. But I don't know you well enough to love you the way a father should love a son. And that's my fault. That's completely my fault. It was the most honest thing John had ever said to another human being. And it destroyed Julian. The boy who'd refused to cry finally broke. Tears streamed down his face, and he didn't bother wiping them away. I knew it, Julian said through his tears. I always knew you didn't really love me, but hearing you say it. Wait, John interrupted. That's not what I said. I said I don't know you well enough. That's different than not loving you. How is that different? John leaned forward, desperate to make his son understand. Love isn't just a feeling you have automatically because someone's your kid. Real love, the kind that matters, comes from knowing someone, from being there, from putting in the work. He took a shaking breath. And I haven't done that work. I've been too scared, too selfish, too messed up. But that doesn't mean I don't want to love you. It means I haven't earned the right to say those words yet." Julian wiped his eyes. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." "Yeah, it is." They sat in the wreckage of that confession. Then Julian said something that changed everything. "Teach me how to play guitar." John looked up confused. "What? You taught your mom's son how to play? Your second family. Teach me. Teach me something. Show me that I matter enough to learn from you." John's throat closed up. "Julian, I'm not asking for your love. I'm asking for your time. Just prove that I'm worth an hour of your life." The request was so simple, so small, and yet it felt impossible. Because if John said yes, he couldn't run anymore, couldn't hide behind his fear and his trauma and his excuses. If John said yes, he'd have to try, actually try. And what if he failed? What if he proved to himself and to his son that he was exactly what he feared? Just another abandoning parent passing down generational trauma. But looking at Julian's face, red and wet with tears, John realized something. He'd already failed. The only question was whether he'd keep failing or whether he'd try to do better. "Okay," John said quietly. "I'll teach you guitar." Julian looked surprised. "Really?" "Yeah, really. I can't promise I'll be good at it. I can't promise I won't fuck it up. But I'll try." "When?" "Now. Today. There's a guitar in the corner of this office. Dr. Janov uses it for music therapy sessions." John stood up and retrieved the acoustic guitar. It was battered and out of tune, but it would work. He sat back down across from his son and began tuning the strings. "First lesson," John said. "The guitar doesn't care who your father is or what mistakes you've made. It just responds to what you give it. You put in honest effort, you get honest sound." Julian watched his father's fingers move across the frets. "Is that why you love music more than people?" The question was sharp, cutting, accurate. "Maybe," John admitted. "Music never left me, never judged me, never asked for more than I could give." "I'm not asking for more than you can give," Julian said. "I'm just asking for something." John looked at his son, really looked at him, saw the intelligence in his eyes, the hurt, the hope he was trying desperately to hide. "You're right," John said. "You deserve something, so let me give you this." He positioned Julian's hands on the guitar, showing him how to hold it, where to place his fingers, how to strum. "This chord is C. It's the first chord I learned. The first real sound I ever made on a guitar." Julian pressed down on the strings. His first attempt was clumsy, producing a muted, discordant sound. "Like this?" he asked. "Harder. Press down harder. It'll hurt at first. Your fingertips aren't calloused yet, but that's part of learning. The pain means you're building something." Julian pressed harder. This time, the chord rang out clear and true. His face lit up. "I did it." "Yeah," John said, and for the first time in years he felt something close to pride. "You did it." They spent the next hour in that office, John teaching, Julian learning, neither of them talking about the heavy conversation they'd just had. But something had shifted. Something small but significant. For 1 hour, John Lennon was a father, and Julian finally had proof that he mattered. They were in the middle of teaching Julian his third chord when Dr. Janov knocked and entered. He looked between father and son, saw the guitar, and understood immediately what had happened. "How are we doing?" he asked carefully. "Fine," John said. "Just teaching Julian some basics." Dr. Janov nodded. "Julian, would you mind stepping outside for a few minutes? I need to speak with your father." Julian looked worried. "Are you going to tell him to make me leave?" "No, nothing like that. I just need to check in with him. You won't be long." Julian reluctantly left the office, taking the guitar with him. Once the door closed, Dr. Janov sat down. "That was brave, what you did." "Which part? Admitting I don't really know my own son? Real brave, that. Staying when you wanted to run, teaching him when you wanted to hide. That's the bravery I'm talking about. John lit another cigarette. He asked me if I loved him, and I couldn't say yes. Because you don't? Or because you're scared to? Both. Neither. I don't fucking know. Dr. Janov leaned forward. John, we've been doing this therapy for months now. Working through your mother issues, your abandonment issues. But we've never addressed the core problem. Which is? You think you're unlovable. And because you think you're unlovable, you sabotage every relationship before it can prove you wrong. John's jaw tightened. That's bullshit pop psychology. Is it? You left Cynthia before she could leave you. You keep Yoko at arm's length, even though you claim she's your soulmate. You abandoned Julian before he could reject you. You even left the Beatles before they could kick you out. They weren't going to kick me out, weren't they? Paul was taking over. George was growing stronger. Ringo was sick of the fighting. You could feel it ending, so you ended it first, on your terms. John stood up, agitated. So what? So I protect myself. That's just survival. It's not survival. It's self-destruction. You're so busy protecting yourself from potential hurt that you're guaranteeing actual hurt. You're creating the very abandonment you fear. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. The question is, are you going to keep doing damage or are you going to try to heal it? John sat down heavily. He's better off without me. Stop it. Dr. Janov's voice was sharp now. Stop hiding behind that excuse. Your mother probably told herself the same thing when she gave you to Mimi. He's better off without me. Did that make you feel better? Did that heal your abandonment issues? No. Then why would it work for Julian? The logic was undeniable. John was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. I'm terrified of him. Why? Because he's proof of my failures. He's walking evidence that I'm just like my mother. Just like my father. Just another Lennon who abandons their kids and fucks them up for generations. Or, Dr. Janov said gently, he's an opportunity to break that cycle, to be different, to choose differently. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You're strong enough to be John Lennon, to write songs that change the world, to stand up to the establishment, to risk everything for love with Yoko. But you're not strong enough to spend time with your son? The comparison stung because it was true. John had courage for everything except the things that mattered most. What do I do? John asked. Right now, today, what do I actually do? You make a choice. You can send Julian away and keep living with the guilt and the fear. Or you can invite him into your life, imperfectly, messily, honestly, and try to build something real. And if I fail, then you fail. But at least you tried. At least Julian will know his father cared enough to try. John stubbed out his cigarette. His hands had stopped shaking. Bring him back in, he said. When Julian came back into the office, he looked scared, like he expected his father to tell him this was all a mistake, that he needed to go home, that the brief moment of connection was over. Instead, John said 5 words that Julian would remember for the rest of his life. I want you to stay. Julian blinked. What? Here, in Los Angeles. Not in this office, obviously, but with me, for a while, a month, maybe longer. I want to get to know you properly. Julian looked at Dr. Janov, as if checking whether this was some kind of therapeutic trick. Your father's being sincere, Dr. Janov confirmed. What about Mom? What about school? I'll call your mom. We'll work it out. And you can do your schoolwork here. I'll hire a tutor if we need to. The point is, I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being the kind of father my father was. So I'm going to try something different. Try what? Try actually being your dad. Julian's voice was small. For how long? I don't know. As long as you'll let me. As long as it takes to build something real. What if it doesn't work? John looked his son in the eye. Then at least we tried. At least you'll know I gave a shit. That you mattered enough for me to fail spectacularly, instead of just not showing up. Despite everything, Julian almost smiled. You talk about failure a lot. Because I'm good at it. But maybe I can be good at this too. if you're willing to give me a chance. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Will Yoko be okay with it? It was a fair question. Yoko's relationship with John's past life was complicated at best. Yoko will have to understand, John said firmly. Because you're my son, you were here first. And I should have never made you feel like you came second. Does that mean I'm more important than her? It means you're both important, just differently. Julian processed this. Can I call Mom first, before I decide? Of course. Dr. Janov left the office again to give them privacy. John showed Julian where the phone was and waited while his son made the call. He could only hear Julian's side of the conversation. Mom, it's me. Yeah, I'm with Dad, at his therapy place. He wants me to stay here. For a while, to get to know him. And I don't know, a month maybe? No, he seems serious. Mom, when was the last time he seemed serious about anything involving me? There was a long pause. Okay. Yeah, I want to try too. I love you. Tell Uncle Charlie I said hi. Julian hung up and turned to face John. She said, okay, but if you mess this up, she's gonna kill you herself. Fair enough. So what happens now? John looked at this boy who was almost a stranger. This boy who had his eyes and his stubborn chin and his fear of being left behind. Now we figure it out. Together. One day at a time. Will you keep teaching me guitar? Every day. And I'll teach you piano too if you want. And songwriting. And all the stuff I wish someone had taught me when I was your age. What if I'm not good at it? Then you're not good at it. Not everyone has to be a musician. The point isn't to make you into mini-me. The point is to spend time together. To let you know me and let me know you. Julian nodded slowly. Okay, I'll stay. John felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Relief, hope, terror. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For giving me a chance I don't deserve. Julian looked at his father with those two old eyes. Everyone deserves a second chance, even you. The simplicity of that statement nearly broke John. They left Dr. Janov's office together that afternoon, father and son, walking into uncertainty. John took Julian to the house in Bel Air, where he was staying during his separation from Yoko. It was too big, too empty, too full of expensive furniture that meant nothing. But for the next month, it would be their space, their attempt at building something neither of them knew how to build. A family. 6 weeks later, Julian was still in Los Angeles. He'd missed more school than Cynthia was comfortable with, but she'd agreed to extend the visit after talking to John several times on the phone. Because something was working. John and Julian weren't perfect. They argued. They had awkward silences. There were moments when John's old patterns kicked in and he wanted to run. But he didn't run. Every morning, they had breakfast together. Every afternoon, guitar lessons. Every evening, they'd watch television or talk or just exist in the same space. John learned that Julian loved science fiction and hated Brussels sprouts, and had a wicked sense of humor when he felt safe enough to show it. Julian learned that his father was deeply insecure, incredibly intelligent, and funnier than anyone had a right to be when he wasn't trying to be John Lennon. The icon. They were building something, slowly, imperfectly, but real. One night, 3 days before Julian was scheduled to return to England, they sat together on the back patio under the Los Angeles stars. Julian was playing guitar. He'd gotten quite good, and John was just listening. When the song ended, Julian set down the guitar and said, "Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you regret it? Leaving me and Mum for Yoko?" It was the question John had been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "That's complicated," John started, but Julian cut him off. No more complicated answers, just honest ones. John took a breath. "I don't regret Yoko. I don't regret following my heart and finding someone who understood me. But I regret how I did it. I regret leaving you behind. I regret not fighting harder to keep you in my life. I regret making you feel like you didn't matter. Do I matter now? Yes, God, yes. These past 6 weeks have been some of the best weeks of my life, not because they were easy, but because they were real. Julian looked at his father. I don't hate you anymore. Period. You hated me? Yeah, for years. I hated you for leaving, for choosing her, for forgetting me. But I don't anymore. Why not? Julian shrugged. Because you're trying. That's all I ever wanted. For you to try. John felt tears sting his eyes. I'm going to keep trying. Even after you go home. I'm going to call you every week. I'm going to visit. I'm going to be the father I should have been from the start. What made you change your mind? Why now? John thought about that therapy session 6 weeks ago. That moment when Julian asked if he loved him, and John couldn't say yes. Because you asked me a question I couldn't answer, and it made me realize that I was doing exactly what my mother did to me, running away from love because I was scared of it. Are you still scared? Terrified, but I'm more scared of losing you completely, of waking up in 20 years and realizing I never really knew my son. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Julian said, I think I love you, Dad. The word dad hit John like a revelation. Not John, not father, Dad. I think I love you too, Jules, John said, his voice breaking on the nickname. You think? John smiled through his tears. I know I love you. I just needed to get to know you first, to understand what that meant. Julian stood up and, somewhat awkwardly, hugged his father. It was clumsy and uncertain and beautiful. Two people learning how to be family. When they pulled apart, John said, I'm going to write you a song. A real one. Not about politics or revolution or any of that stuff. Just about you. About how it feels to have a son. What will you call it? John thought for a moment. Beautiful boy. Because that's what you are. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Julian smiled. A real smile. That's corny as hell. Yeah, it is. But it's true. 3 days later, John took Julian to the airport. They stood at the gate. Back when you could still do that, and said goodbye. I'll call you Sunday, John promised. You better. And I'll come visit next month. We'll go to that science fiction movie you wanted to see. Okay. Julian picked up his bag, started to walk away, then turned back. Dad? Yeah. Thank you. For choosing to try. John's throat closed up. Thank you for letting me. He watched his son walk through the gate until he couldn't see him anymore. Then John Lennon did something he'd never done before. He kept his promise. He called every Sunday. He visited every month. He wrote that song, Beautiful Boy, and it became one of his most beloved works. He didn't become a perfect father. He still struggled with his demons. He still made mistakes. But he tried. And in trying, he broke the cycle that had haunted the Lennon family for generations. Years later, after John died, Julian would say in interviews, My father wasn't perfect. Our relationship wasn't perfect. But in those last years, he showed up. He tried. And that made all the difference. That day in Dr. Janov's office, when Julian walked in unexpectedly, John Lennon had a choice. He could run, like he always had, or he could stay and face the hardest truth of his life, that he was capable of causing the same pain that had defined his childhood. He chose to stay. He chose to confess his failures. He chose to try. And in that choice, he discovered something more powerful than any song he'd ever written. The power of showing up. The courage of imperfect love. The radical act of choosing your child even when, especially when, you're terrified of failing them. That therapy session left everyone in shock, not because of what was said, but because of what happened after. A father learned to be present. A son learned he was worth showing up for. And a cycle of abandonment was finally broken. If this story of courage, confession, and the power of second chances moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to try. That showing up imperfectly is better than not showing up at all. Have you ever had to choose between running from fear or facing it? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more untold stories about the people behind the legends who chose to be better than their past.